You're listening to Packers Talk Network. PackersTalk.com.
Welcome to the Packers Weekly Podcast, part of PackersTalk.com network. I'm your host, Miles Teddick, joined by your co-host, Tim Hamilton. We are diehard Packers fans that love talking about the Pack. We're not getting into all the national sports media talking points and nonsense. We're sticking with football, diving into the top topics around the Pack every week, breaking down games during the season, sorting through all of the drama and the rumors of the offseason. If y'all want to support the podcast, please spike that like button for us. Give us a follow on all the socials, and most importantly, subscribe to the Packers Talk YouTube channel. We would certainly love that. It makes a big difference for us, helps us out, keeps this Packer Talk going, and makes a big difference for us. So thank you to all the listeners and subscribers, and for those folks joining us here this evening. Tonight, we get to have some overreactions, underreactions, all the reactions to the Lions game, and there are a variety of them. Which ones are the right ones? Who knows? We'll figure it out. But first, a few words from Wisconsin's own Ticket King. For over 30 years, Ticket King has been providing Packers tickets to Packers fans. You can find them on the web at theticketking.com or visit their locations in Green Bay and Milwaukee. For direct links to specific Packers game tickets, go to packerstalk.com/tickets or browse their website at theticketking.com. Good evening, Tim. How we doing, sir?
Good evening, Miles. I've been better, but, probably doing better than the Packers are today, coming off that ugly, bad loss to the Lions. But, yeah, happy that they're going into a bye week. It's a needed bye week.
The bye week is just a perfect time. Just nicely delivered, beautifully placed. I love it. It's right where it needs to be.
I think we both liked that when the schedule came out, and it's playing in there. I mean, they've been lucky with injuries for the most part. I know Jordan Love missed 2.5 games, and Jair's been out of the lineup a couple times. So they don't have a ton of injuries, but it's a nice time to get a couple guys back, get Jordan Love healthy, and it's just, 9 games through the season right there in kind of the middle of your season to get this bye and reset and focus on all of the things that they need to improve on as they head down the home stretch here after the bye week.
And going into the bye, would you not have been happy saying, hey man, 6-3 going in the bye at 6-3? What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, that's not a bad spot to be in when you consider a year ago at this time they were 3-6, and we were talking about, where's their draft pick going to be? Are they going to have a top 10 pick? Who's going to survive the season? Do they have the right quarterback? Much different scenario now. I know there's been, some pretty heavy overreaction on Packers Twitter since that game against the Lions on Sunday. But I mean, 6-3 is a good spot to be in, especially when you look around the NFC. I mean, other than the Lions, who else is there right now that you can look at and be like, yeah, they're a true Super Bowl contender? I don't really, it's a stretch to say anyone else, so I think they're in a decent spot. A lot of the issues they've had so far up to this point, and that continued in the Lions game, but a lot of the issues are self-inflicted problems that we think they can fix. We're hoping they can fix. So it sets up for a potential, like if they can fix some of these issues, they can go on a run again in the second half like they did last season. And who knows, that can get them very deep in the playoffs. But the flip side of that is now we're 9 games into the season. Yes, 6-3 is a nice record, but it could be better. And the issues they've had since week 1 are still there, and they've been popping up week after week, and they've overcome them. But when you play good teams like the Lions, when you make mistakes like the Packers did on Sunday, you're not going to overcome those mistakes. You can overcome them against some of those AFC South teams that they were playing, but you're not going to overcome them when you play a team like the Lions. So, it's not a bad spot to be in, but there is a ton of things for them to clean up. And a lot of it's not so much the teams are dominating them. They're not. It's not so much the teams are even outplaying them. They're not. they're doing a lot of their own, their biggest issue right now, their biggest enemy right now is themselves. So, it's a lot to clean up, but we're gonna see coming out of the bye if they're capable of that, and that's going to really determine how far they're able to go this season.
Yeah, and I think the important thing to remember is what they did last season. Is there any reason that they're not capable of doing the same thing, similar thing? Shoot, maybe something even more impressive, right? I mean, they did it last year. Why can't they do it this year?
Yeah, I mean, that's true, but it's a different season, a different team.
Oh, of course.
So everything's, but you look at that team and they were so young, and yes, they're still the youngest team in football now, or at least they were at the beginning of the season, but they have experience that they didn't have last season.
Right.
So you've been through that. You know what it was like to be in a tough spot last season and overcome it and go on a run. And now you have all those banked reps, all that banked adversity, the adversity they've gone through this year, losing their quarterback for 2.5 games. So yeah, they're capable of doing that. But up to this point, it's been the same issues recurring week after week. It's nice that they have 6 wins to, kind of overshadow those issues, but it's also concerning that they haven't been able to clean anything up to this point.
Yeah, well, and I wouldn't even say that they haven't been able to clean anything up to this point. I think that might be in the overreaction category. I would say they're still playing whack-a-mole. They've struggled with one thing one week and they fixed it the next week, but then something else comes up. And that's a lot what the first half of last season was like, but I think the first half of last season was that way to a much more extreme extent. I think the mistakes in this first half of the season have been less, certainly still there, right? There's still penalties, there's drops, there's probably some wrong routes and things that we haven't even picked up on, miscommunications. There's clearly mistakes. You see it play out in the play, but it's just obvious that it's less than last year, because last year it was obvious how bad it was, right? You could see guys running wrong routes and running into each other and doing things where you're just like, oh no, not that. So I think we have to be able to take inventory on the situation that way before we allow the sky to start falling, which again, I don't understand why we're in the sky's falling territory.
It's not.
We just shouldn't be here. This team is 6-3. You know whose sky is falling is Dallas. Dallas's sky is falling.
Right. There's a bunch of teams there's some teams whose skies never had a chance. Like we're not the Panthers. There was no sky for some reason.
Right. The sky already fell on them. They're picking up the pieces now.
Right, for years. Yeah, we need to relax. And it's, to me, the issues they're having, like the penalties, the drop passes that you mentioned, it's not just a number of penalties and drop passes, and there's been far too many, far too frequent. It's also the timing of them. Like there's been so many third down penalties, drop passes. There's been penalties as they're driving into the red zone or inside the red zone that sets them back. Instead of being touchdowns, or kicking or missing field goals. It's just, that's the frustrating part, is like this offense has shown they can move the ball on pretty much every defense they've played this season, but it's finishing drives. They haven't been good in the red zone at scoring touchdowns, and part of that is all the mistakes they make when they get down there.
Right.
And the amount of yards and the amount of plays that they're leaving on the field with the drop passes, with we saw Christian Watson last night too. Really, one that was extremely glaring, where he's open for potentially a long touchdown, and I don't know if he lost the ball in the rain, if the wind took it, he just completely mistimes the jump. He's out of position. The ball was exactly where he was supposed to be on the route.
Like your eyes look at it, you're like, man, if you just keep going, it's going to be in the bread basket.
It's going to fall there. I don't know what he saw. And then he had a chance on another one in the end zone that he mistimed. It's things like that, mistakes like that. They had the game was pretty much decided at this point, but they still had a shot to get closer. And they had, 2nd and 1 deep in Lions territory. You get 3 shots to get 1 yard, and they don't get it. And it's a combination of, Jordan Love almost making a disastrous turnover where he could just just throw the ball out of bounds. Like, he's got to learn from that. And we'll talk about his interceptions, but it's he throws a ball the next play in the end zone. Wicks is wide open, drops it, but the throw is also behind him. The throw could have been better, but it's a drop.
Yeah.
But it's on both of them. And then 4th and 1, they get stuffed on a running play.
Yeah.
It's things like that. Like, they're not executing. They're making these mistakes. And last year at this time, it was okay. There's so many rookies. There's so many inexperienced players. It's a first-year starting quarterback. Like, there's an excuse for that. This year, it's like you don't have that stuff. Like,
right.
And you're still making somewhat similar mistakes. Some, in some ways it's different, but you're still making a ton of mistakes every game. You're still shooting yourself in the foot. Their toughest opponent has been themselves.
Right.
So
that's exactly the correct analysis of it. That's what everybody's been saying too. And I mean, I get it, but at the same time, show me a team that isn't kind of guilty of the same thing.
That's true. And I understand that. But it makes me think, like, we saw them overcome it and go on a run the second half of last year. Can they do it again? I don't know. Like, you're 9 games into a season. Is this who you are right now? I know it's great the way the Lions, if you're a Lions fan, the way they've played, and the Chiefs, the way they've played, but you want to be at your best December and January. You don't want to be at your best in November. You want to be building up to it. And maybe this is the best. If this is the best the Lions are, they very well might get beat in January. Like, I don't know if that's enough to get them through as good as they've played right now. And the Packers, they want to be getting better. They want to be building this up. Are they really taking those steps and getting better? I kind of feel like they're almost like the same mistakes over and over again. You're almost kind of treading water right now. Like, you need to start seeing some improvement here. Whether it's penalties being cut out, whether it's the interceptions and the poor decisions at times by the quarterback, whether it's the drop passes, mistakes on special teams that continue. Like, you got to see some improvement somewhere to really, start building to what you want to be in December and January. And that's going to be the big question coming out of the bye week is, can they make those adjustments again? I think you and I both agree they have the talent. They have the players to do that. There's definitely spots where they, if they make a trade before the trade deadline, which I don't think either one of us are expecting them to do, but if they did, there's certain players that can help this team, certain positions that can be helped at. But as they are right now, if they just improve internally, they can be a contender in the NFC for sure.
Oh yeah. And I think there's still room to improve internally. We have to constantly remind ourselves this is the first season in this defensive scheme. Not that the defense was the weakness of this game. No. My argument is that this defense played very well in this game. And you have to keep everything into perspective. The Lions very well might be like the best team in the NFL right now, right? Like, there's a case for that. If there's certainly a case for them to be the best team in the NFC right now. So you got to keep that into perspective too. It's like, this is a good team. When you play good teams, you're probably not going to have your best day, and your goal is to make sure that they don't have their best day either. But, this is a good team. They don't make mistakes. They're very well coached. The Fighting Dan Campbells, I think, is what Pat McAfee called them. And I love that name. And they are. And I made the comment on Twitter earlier today that, because somebody was saying, hey, look, I see Dan Campbell's done a good job, but this team isn't the same without Ben Johnson, which is true. But I've never seen a Lions team that believes in itself as much as this Lions team does.
Yes.
These guys are dogs, man. They are lions for real. And lions, like they don't have any idea about how bad they've been in the past, or, losing streaks or what things are supposed to be. And so that to me is all Dan Campbell. That's a culture thing, and hats off to him because they were so bad for so long. But there's no doubt that they take a step backwards without Ben Johnson. So all of that said, like, you're going up against one of the best. You've got to understand that. And the other thing is, as far as the Christian Watson, sorry, I had to get a couple of rebuttals in here on you, Tim. I'll pass it back to you. But with the Christian Watson things, I was watching that too and seeing him misjudge those things. The biggest thing I don't know about is what were the conditions in the stadium, because I heard somebody saying something about 40-mile-per-hour winds. I know I saw the rain was rough, and that can toss everything up. Like if the wind's blowing around, it makes it really easy to misjudge things. The rain's blowing around, like that's a very big equalizer. So it's not necessarily an excuse, but it's just a factor. And when those factors are present, you just can't expect perfection, I think is what I ultimately mean. At the end of the day, you're one Jordan Love mistake away from this being like, really tight, if not tied game. And, it's a really close game. This is not a big blowout. I get at one point it was 28-3 or something, but like this was just not that far out, and was it 28-7?
24-3 at one point.
24-3. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, so it's just like, yeah, it looked blown out, but it really comes down to a handful of things. And are those things correctable? Yeah, they're correctable for sure. So that's where I just, want to get those rebuttals in there. We can't really make a lot of deep judgments based on this game. But I think, again, you can take away themes from it, right? What is the context of it, and how did things look against that context? And, one of the things that I take from it, these guys don't freaking quit, man. They don't quit. I'm going to keep saying it. But that's my piece on this. So I flip it back to you.
No, you're right. And they don't quit. We saw that last season with some of the games where they got down and came back. We saw earlier this season, the Minnesota game, where they're down 28-0 at halftime. They could have quit and they didn't. They made it a game. And you're right about the Lions. They're a really good team. They may be the best. They're definitely, to me, they're definitely the best team in the NFC. I don't think it's even debatable in my mind. And they may be the best team in football overall. But
yep.
I'll also say, when you play a team like that, when you play a good team, you can't make the mistakes the Packers made on Sunday. You can't make half the mistakes the Packers made on Sunday and expect to win.
Exactly.
The Lions this is a different Lions team than we've ever seen before. They didn't make any mistakes. They were happy to sit back, be somewhat conservative, and just allow the Packers to lose the game and give them the game, and just watch the Packers make all the mistakes. And I think the one point in the game where maybe the Lions could have self-destructed, and probably in the past they would have, was the Brian Branch hit and then ejection. He's losing his mind. The coaches are upset. There's players on the field coming over and arguing with the referees. 30 yards and penalties handed to the Packers. That was like, Brian Branch is one of their best defensive players.
Right.
That, in years past, that Lions team probably would have melted down from that. Instead, they got to stop. The Packers missed the field goal, and that was kind of it. Like, it had no effect on them the rest of the way, really. When you play a good team like the Lions, and they're legit, the way they've been built with Dan Campbell's mentality, players they have acquired. I know they're a dome team, and this a lot was made like this was their first outdoor game. In the rain and the wind, they handled it much better than the Packers did. And they only got their next outdoor game is late in the season, late December in Chicago. I don't think any of that matters, because if they keep winning the way they are, they're going to go into the playoffs, and they're not going to have to play outside because they're going to have home field advantage. They're very good, and they can beat you in a lot of different ways. And the Packers learned that if you're going to make those mistakes, you might be able to get away with them against Jacksonville and Tennessee and Indianapolis. You're not going to get away with them against a team like Detroit. Detroit didn't make those mistakes, and that's why it was a 24-3 game. And, the Packers did show some life and kind of got back in it, but it was never really in doubt in the second half. They just, you can't do that. That's and you can't say that about any recent Lions team, really, in my lifetime of watching football. Like, for them to just be like, hey, we're not going to make a mistake, and we're just going to, we're going to do what we do, and you're going to implode, and we're going to. It was impressive to see, and just completely different than anything we've seen from the Lions. Having said all that, and giving them credit, I'm really interested to see the Packers play them again.
Yeah,
because they were not blown off the field in that game in any way. And I know, you can look at the stats, and, they only gave up 17 points on defense, and they held them to a season low in rushing yards, and Goff threw for 145 yards. And Packers outgained them and all that stuff is nice. And then you look, well, 6 drop passes and 10 penalties and a pick 6 and all that stuff. Like, so who cares?
Mistakes.
Yeah, but I didn't come out of that game and be like, man, they're never going to beat the Lions. The Lions are just too, like, they're a good team, credit to them.
Yes.
But if the Packers clean their stuff up, I'm not scared of them going to Detroit and playing them again. It kind of reminds me of last year where they got beat pretty good at home by the Lions, and then they turned it around and beat them in their building on Thanksgiving. So, they got the rematch in about a month, and I think that's going to tell us a lot about where the Packers are headed this season.
I agree. And I think that there will be a little bit of a ramp up to that to give you an indication where they're going. But my just pulse read on it, massive respect to the Lions because they're very good. But I feel like the Lions are at a point where I don't know that they're going to get much better than they are, right? Like, they're good. Might be the best team in the NFL right now. But how long can you operate at that level? And if you don't stay operating at that level, how far down do you go? And I think that's what typically you see in the NFL is sometimes teams peak a little bit too soon. And when they fall hard. So, again, it's easy to say that because you've got Aiden Hutchinson, who's obviously not coming back, their best player, arguably. But even without him, they're proving that they're a very good football team and they have not lost an ounce of belief in themselves. Like what you're saying, I've never seen a Lions team that believes in themselves as much as this team does. Like, they are 110% bought in. They have no clue about the Lions' past and that they're supposed to not be good. They don't have any of that in their mind at all. So credit to them. That is evidence of a complete culture change in that organization, which most teams and other teams are demonstrating an inability to do. So one of them is not too far down south of the Packers. But I just don't know, like, how you make an argument that this Lions team gets better than they are right now. Like, how do they operate at a higher level than they already are? And this point in the season, not to like, we have no position to rain on anybody's parade, but at this point in the season, I'd be lying if I was a Packers fan and felt the same way, right? Like, if the Packers are operating at their full potential right now, they're just kicking butt and taking names, like just running through it. I'd have that little inkling of like, oh no, is this too soon? Kind of like the 2011 team, the 15-1 team. There was definitely a feeling of that where it's like, wow, these guys are really good. Can they do this the whole way? Can they really keep this up? And they didn't. So that's the way I see the Lions team. Call me biased, fine. I'm obviously biased. I am literally wearing Packers colored sunglasses. But I think on the other side of things with the Packers, they have a lot of room for improvement. Like, we're sitting here talking about all these mistakes and what those led to and maybe what they didn't lead to, right? What they prevented from happening. I mean, if Jordan Love just doesn't throw a pick 6 right there, how different does the game look? So this Packers team, to me, has a long way that they can still improve, and they're winning games. You didn't win this game, but this is like a pretty high difficulty level game. One of the best teams, if not the best team in the NFL. Conditions are bad, atrocious, downpour. I, again, heard 40-mile-per-hour winds. I don't know if that was an exaggeration or not. We'll have to go back and confirm the weather radar and whatever. But anyway, that was a tough game to win. Like, you have to be playing at a high level of football to win that game. And the Lions are. The Packers are not. We knew that based on how they played against the Jaguars the week before. That Jordan Love is banged up, man. He's hopping around on a kind of a gimpy groin, and that's that. I think that contributes to a lot of these things. A quarterback's mechanics, a lot of them are driven in that hip area. And that, I mean, you injure your groin, that's going to throw off all sorts of things, man, for a quarterback. So him trying to gut it out may not be the best thing, right? Like, somebody might need to talk him out of that. We'll see how he does after the bye week now. That's a nicely timed thing. But I'm not here like this whole, like, anybody who's out here saying, did they sign Love too soon? Just get out of here with that. Like, if you're questioning Jordan Love as the franchise quarterback and them signing him, just sit down, sit this conversation out. Just take that one, go touch grass. That is just not the right way to think. The guy's banged up, and again, conditions were about as bad as they can be. It's one of those things where you're not going to get an A+ performance based on those conditions, based on the things you're bringing into the game. Now, could they have helped themselves? And I'll toss it to one of our friends over here who is watching or listening from Corsicana, Texas tonight. Richard Chowers, glad you're with us, sir. Tears of the Dallas fans are flowing hard. Gotta love it. And the rain is flowing hard down here too. But Lions are hard nosed. They have more football players mixed with their athletes. Fair enough. And criticism where it's deserved. Watson had his last difference maker game win. Yes, Christian Watson had some mistakes in this game. Dontavian Wicks had mistakes in this game. There were mistakes to go around in this game. Fair enough. Criticism earned, no doubt about it. But we cannot be making blanket judgments about what this team is going to be going forward because of this game. It just doesn't make sense. You don't need to do that. What you really got to look at is, they're 6-3. Why are they 6-3? Man, they found a lot of different ways to win and get to that 6-3 mark where most Packers teams of the past would not have, right? We'd have a very different conversation on our hands with most of those teams of the past. Maybe they're not a losing record, but you're not 6-3, right? They haven't done a great job of winning with a backup quarterback in the past. And right now they're undefeated with their backup quarterback, which is pretty cool to say. So in the past, they weren't really able to rely on the ground game to win games, right? We were always looking around like going, oh, great. Teams know we can't pass, and they also know that these running backs are like B- at best. Here we go. And that's how it always was. You just couldn't rely on your ground game to win you a game. And now they can. And certainly I'm not no shade at Aaron Jones. There were several games in the recent past that he was able to shoulder the load. But for the most part in the past, called past 10, 15, 20 years of Packers history, they haven't been able to rely on the ground game like they have this season. So being able to get to 6-3 the way that they have should be massively encouraging, and it's an indication that you have good leadership at the helm, making good decisions in adverse situations. That's how you win championships. So get things right during the bye week, get healthy, get Jordan Love right. And I think that they clean up a lot of these mistakes pretty quick. But if Jordan Love's mechanics are going to be off because his groin's not right, and so he's hopping around, now it's sloppy weather and he's trying to protect himself and he's compensating in weird ways, that's just going to lead to him not being a very good quarterback, and we saw that. And it's tough for people to be a good quarterback in that situation. So I think you need to be able to take that for what it is, toss it out. This one was a stinker. Let it go. Don't watch it again. And I think we have plenty of reason to be looking forward to the next matchup with the Lions, because they can go into Detroit and win that game just the same way that they did last season. So I'm very excited about that. Not discouraged about the potential of the season at all. I think these guys are just going to keep getting better. They're going to keep doing what they've been doing. They're adapting. They're figuring things out. I am not worried. So there's my piece.
I hope you're right. I love your enthusiasm and your optimism.
But let's try to take some optimistic things out of this game. I mean, from the defensive perspective, you held one of the best offenses, if not the best offense in the league right now, to 17 points. Is that not that's a win, man? You should win that. If you tell me that before the game, I say you win the game.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think the defense played great. There was things they gave up. The running game gave up too many, explosive plays, and they couldn't stop Jahmyr Gibbs at times, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Anytime they needed a completion to him, they got it. But to your point, if you would have said before the game they held the Lions offense to 17 points, I would have taken that, especially with the way the Lions have been putting up points recently. I mean, they put up 50-something against Dallas. They were in the 40s against Tennessee. They put up, I think it was near 40 or in the 40s against Seattle. Like they've been killing teams, scoring a ton on offense.
Yeah.
I mean, Jared Goff is barely throwing incompletions, let alone turning the ball over or anything like that. So, I think I think that was encouraging that they only gave up 17 points to a quality opponent like that. I think there's still a lot of room for improvement defensively, and I think part of that is the new scheme and figuring out how to use guys and which guys to use, and that's going to be something like we're going to see develop, here after the bye and over the second half of the season. But yeah, I think, defensively, 17 points is nice, and he would have taken it. And despite everything that they can do better, hopefully in the second half of the season, that needs to improve defensively. I think at this point in the season, you got to be happy with where their defense is, and it's certainly in a much better spot than it was at any time, when Joe Barry was here as their defensive coordinator.
Right. Yeah.
And
I think Joe Barry would have gotten cooked by this Lions offense.
Yeah, I mean, he got cooked by Carolina's offense last year, and the Giants, Tommy DeVito and all those bums that, let's not go there. To me, the bigger concern in this game and the, the finger that you can point for the blame is on the offense.
Yeah.
And it was, the running game was really good in the first half and they got away from it, but it was the score. You get down by as much as they were down in the game. I get it. You can't, pound Josh Jacobs every down. He ran great. He ran hard. The problems were, the penalties, the drop passes. Jordan Love, I thought, he made some really nice throws. And if you take out the drops, he played good, but he still threw a terrible pick six, which I don't know what he was doing on the play. And even a couple of the drops, the passes passed to Chris Brooks, which was a third down play. He at least gets a first down. He maybe scores a touchdown on that play. And then the one that Wicks in the end zone, those passes were behind. They had to reach back to try to make the catch. Yes, they should have made the catch, but the pass should have been better. No. It's little things like that if he can improve on it. And then big things like the turnovers. There's been way too many interceptions this year. And some of them have been terrible decisions, like the one against the Lions. He's got to learn to just throw the ball. Like, credit to him, and I think LaFleur alluded to this in his press conference on Monday. Like, they don't want to take the playmaking out of it because he can make those outside the pocket, off schedule, late in the down kind of spectacular throws. So you don't want to take that away and say, like, don't make a mistake, just throw it away, just check it down. Like, they don't want to take that out. But when you have some of these glaring mistakes and interceptions or inaccurate throws, like, I almost think you got to settle him down and let him have a lot more easier throws. And he's also got to learn, like, throwing the ball out of bounds. Yeah, it's not getting you anything, but there's another down coming up. Like, you don't have to try to be Superman on every play. Like,
right.
Rein it in a little bit because you can still make those Superman plays, but if it's not there on that play, just let it go and go on to the next one. I think he forces it at times and gets himself in trouble. And at the same time, in his defense, it would be nice if the receiver started helping him out. I mean, there's way too many drops, and there's still a lot of cases of receivers not fighting back for balls, not going up and getting balls. Like, they can step up and help him out. And that's one of my concerns with the offense going into the bye, and we're going to see how it translates, what changes after the buys. I don't feel like there's receivers on this team that have been consistent all year. Like, Jaden Reed was really good early in the year, and then I think they got too much in the, putting him in the backfield and throwing swing passes and all that. Had a nice game against the Lions. I think he's been the best receiver. Dobbs has had his moments. But beyond that, like, who's stepping up and making plays? Like, I almost feel like they need more from these receivers beyond just the drops. They need some guys to start making some plays and helping out their offense, helping out the quarterback. And, I think there's an argument to be made. Like, and we've talked about this, all off season into the regular season, like, they're deep at receiver. They got all these talented guys. Maybe they need to focus in and, like, say, all right, we're going to play these three primarily and sprinkle in, numbers 4 and 5. Like, let's go with Watson, Dobbs, and Reed. And Wicks has had struggles all season. Maybe it's time to cut back on his snaps. And, at times he can come in when somebody needs a breather, but maybe it's time to really start feeding the ball to guys like Watson and Dobbs and Reed primarily, and not worry so much about getting everyone their snaps and everyone involved. Maybe that can lead to, guys getting better chemistry with the quarterback and making plays for the quarterback. But yeah, there's a lot of talent at receiver. I just feel like the consistency is very lacking right now, other than probably Jaden Reed for the most part. But they need somebody to step it up, and I'm not sure. And I know this was in the comments from R, and I kind of agree with them in a way, but I think you're a little too harsh. But I'm not sure what Christian Watson is at this point. Like, he's got to be more than just a nice blocker and a guy that takes the deep routes and takes attention. Like, can we get him some easy routes that aren't always deep? Like, can we throw him some slants? Can we throw him some dig routes over the middle? Like, just some easy completions to get him the ball.
And some of those have been his best plays where he gets the ball and then takes off.
Yeah, and I don't know if he's not the primary guy, if he's not getting open, if they're just not calling stuff like that for him. But like, can we get him some easy completions? Just get the ball in his hands and let's see if he can run with it. And even if he can't, like, if he can get some 8 to 12-yard completions and like just start building it up and getting the ball in his hands more, I think that'll open things up for him. Because right now, I really like him as a player. I'm really rooting for him. But I don't know what he is at this point. And I think if they can get more out of him and start unlocking some of his potential, that can go a long way to the success of this offense.
Yeah, and the bye week can be a good time to work on stuff like that. I mean, again, not to be too repetitive, but it was about this time last season where they flipped some things around, and they figured some things out, right? I think there may have been a little bit of that going on the first part of this season, and we've got to remember Jordan Love. We've seen that he could be fantastic, but he's still a young guy in his second year starting. We see what Stroud looks like in his second year starting. And for a long time there, it's funny, I haven't heard this in a while brought up, but for a long time there, 20 years ago, it seemed like a sophomore slump was something that was kind of expected from QBs. Do you remember that, Tim?
Yeah. Yep.
And it just doesn't seem like that's really talked about anymore. But that was almost expected, is, like a guy who takes over, has, a good season, and then he has a sophomore slump, and so that's where it's just, that used to be expected. So if Jordan Love is having a sophomore slump, it's like, okay, so what I think is really important is what's happening in that. Is he having a sophomore slump because he's uninterested or he's incapable or no, he's not. What it is he's figuring out how to play chess. And this team is figuring out what he can do. Like, they're letting him have a little bit of a loose leash. Go do this, go do that. All right, it's crunch time, man. Let's reel in. Let's get a little bit more high percentage plays in there. Let's take a little less risk. Let's be okay, like you're saying. Let's call it out. Be okay with the dump off. Be okay with throwing it out of bounds, at a guy's feet, whatever it is, instead of the interception. And you got to trust that there's a process happening there. They sit down, they analyze the film. He's sitting there with Clements and LaFleur. And they're going to go through that and they're going to talk about it. I think that they were at a point with Aaron Rodgers in his career where that wasn't happening, where they may have been sitting down and looking at the film, but there wasn't a whole lot of criticism happening. And I think that's what was going on in 2022. But yeah, we've got to leave room for all of the growth to continue, because I don't think that there's any reason why it wouldn't. And I've called it out before, but somebody else who noticeably went through a little bit of a slump after he had success in the league was Mahomes. There was a period there where he started struggling a little bit. People were questioning what was going on with him, and all of a sudden he picked it up. These guys go through a process of learning how to play chess in this league. The quarterbacks do specifically. And when they figure it out, the lights go on. Tom Brady was famous when he said, I got the answers to the test. Why would I quit now? And he rattles off a few more Super Bowls. So I think you got to leave room for the continued growth because they are so young. Health is going to improve over the bye week. Your self-scouting happens over the bye week. So you go back and you look at, what did you do well? What did you not do well? What are the correctable things? And how do you do that? A lot of that gets to happen this week, so The bye week can be exciting for that reason. You don't have to expect necessarily the same thing, the same style of play, the same playbook, all that kind of stuff after the bye week. Expect adjustments, right? Expect to see things dialed in a little bit better, right? And then ours bringing up a good question over here about Musgrave. I'm not sure when Musgrave is supposed to come back.
Yeah, LaFleur mentioned him on Monday in his press conference. I don't know if he got asked about it or he brought it up. He had ankle surgery, Musgrave, which that was new news. So he said they're hoping he's back this year, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be anytime soon.
Yeah, so I mean that's a difference. And Musgrave, he's in that category with Watson, where you send him out down the field, he has to be accounted for, and he's an intimidating matchup, size, speed, for any DB, as fast as he is, as big as he is. He may not be the best tight end in the league. He doesn't have to be, right? And Christian Watson has proved the same thing. He doesn't have to be the best receiver in the league to get the massive amount of respect downfield that he gets. So if you have two of those pieces, you can spread a defense out a lot, right? And that's where we were seeing, guys like Reed and Wicks and Dobbs feasting underneath in these seemingly wide open routes because the guys around them are peeling the defense away from them, and when you got two guys doing that downfield, that is a hard day for a defense. So, yeah, I think he coming back can help a lot, but I think also just utilizing Watson in better ways can help. I think they're going to get a chance to figure that out over the bye week. What I will look for, what I want to see, is more horizontal movement. And yes, offense. You got to get north and south, right? You got to get downfield. You got to get yards. Don't go backwards. But when you have good horizontal movement as an offense, it forces the defense to run exponentially further. And they're not going just back and forth. They're going side to side and back and forth, and you're going to wear guys down a lot quicker with that. You're going to be able to exploit matchups a lot better. I want to see more of the, Watson jet sweep fakes, right? Like, yeah, let's give him a jet sweep, but let's make him wonder if he's got the ball or not. Right now, when he goes on a jet sweep, he's getting the ball, and it's pretty easy for these defenses to key in on him. You need more deception. So that's what I hope to see. What I would look to see after this is more deception, and what a better target than to practice on than the Bears. But there's not a lot of drastic changes that need to happen for the offense. The defense needs to keep getting better. We can get there in just a second. But for the offense, that's what I really look for. I mean, don't forget the run game. The run game is doing well. You can't abandon it. I think they've done a pretty decent job of that. There's definitely been times where they've gotten away from it that it's frustrating. But if they can get more horizontal movement on the offense, that's going to create more rhythm. It's going to create more problems for the defense. It's going to open everything up. So that's what I'm looking for. What about you, man? What are you looking for in the bye week?
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as offensive, we've already talked about it, so I won't go into it too much. But it's if the quarterback could play better from a decision making, from an accuracy standpoint, that's going to go a long way. And I don't mean to put it all on him. I don't think Jordan Love's been bad at all this year. I know he's played hurt through pretty much most of the season between his knee injury and now the groin injury. And he hasn't been helped out by his receivers most of the time. So I'm not putting it on him, but if he could improve his decision-making and overall accuracy. And look, I'm not going to say he's going to turn into Jordan Love that we saw the second half of last year, but something close to that. That's going to go a long way in not only the offensive success, but how far the team can go in the playoffs. But part of that is, can the receivers, we've already talked about this too, but can the receivers step up? Can they start making some plays? And I mean, let's just start catching the ball, but can they start stepping up and making some plays and helping their quarterback out? Enough about potential and how talented they are. Like, it's your second or third years. Like, let's go. Let's see more from you. We need the consistency. So that's what I want to see offensively. I think defensively, they've been pretty good to this point, especially when you consider it's a completely new system that, none of these guys have played in recently, and they're still trying to figure out personnel. But I think, and in some ways they figured out good things about personnel. Evan Williams being on the field all the time was a good move. But I still look at linebacker. Like Quay Walker wasn't terrible against the Lions, but there's still way too many mistakes in his game. And I wonder, like, can they bump him the weak side and either Eric Wilson or Adrian Cooper's your Mike? Cooper had a lot more snaps than McDuffie in this game, so maybe they're finally starting. They got to that point where, Cooper's one of their two or three top linebackers that we've been, asking for weeks now. But we need more Cooper on the field. We need to. I would really like to see less Quay, or at least Quay playing the weak side and not the Mike. They got to figure out that personnel. That's one thing on defense, but if they could just get their highest paid and best players, other than Xavier McKinney, to be their best players, to be the guys that they are being paid to be, that would go a huge way in making them an improved defense, because we haven't seen enough from Rashawn Gary or Kenny Clark or Preston Smith. Jair's been okay, but he needs to be available because the drop off between him and the other cornerbacks is huge.
It's big.
We saw that against the Vikings. We saw it against the Lions. Like,
yeah,
they need Jair out there every game the rest of the year, because if he's not, right now it's a struggle at corner. I know Nixon's done some decent things and probably played a little better than we expected, but you can't rely on him too much. Stokes is lost out there, and whatever's going on with Valentine, he didn't see a whole lot of targets against the Lions, so I don't want to judge him too much. But there's a huge drop off, so they need Jair available, but they need guys like Kenny Clark, Rashawn Gary, Preston Smith. They need them to play better. Quay Walker, I know he's not highest paid guy, but he's a first round guy. He's got to play better.
Yeah.
If they can just get that, they have some of the pieces. I'm not sure if they have all of the pieces that they need for this defense, but the guys they have that are their highest paid and supposed to be best guys, they need them available and playing well. And that would go a long way in helping this defense take another step this season.
No, I agree. Yeah, and you mentioned Valentine. He was actually your fifth highest graded player in PFF in this game with 35 snaps. So his tackling is what really caused his grade to not be much higher. He could have had a really high grade in this game.
Yeah, they didn't target him a ton. Like I mean, I've been saying for weeks, I don't know why he's not getting the snaps over Stokes. I know he was hurt for a little bit, but he's been back and really until Sunday not getting snaps. And the only reason he did on Sunday was because Jair was out. He needs to be ahead of Stokes. I mean, really, I prefer him and Jair as starting outside cornerbacks. And, I don't really want Nixon in the slot either. But if they're going to continue to play Nixon, they need to play Valentine over Stokes. And I'm hoping they start seeing that. And that's kind of the frustrating part, is I think Valentine needs to play more. And then the linebacker mix has been really frustrating. Cooper needs to play more. Eric Wilson needs to play more. I've seen enough of McDuffie. And they, the Quay situation.
McDuffie was the highest graded guy in PFF last week.
Yeah, and I'm not even saying he's a bad option to have, but he should be their fourth linebacker. He shouldn't be what he's been this year, number 2 or number 3. Like, he needs to be number 4 in the pecking order.
Fair enough. Yeah, I agree with that.
But yeah, I think just they got to figure out their personnel, and they need their highest paid guys to play a lot better. I don't know what, especially up front. Like I don't know what the issue is, other than it's probably the transition to a new system. But I'm just really surprised. Like, Rashawn Gary, I think, played a little better, and he's at least getting pressures if he's not getting the sacks.
Yeah.
But Kenny Clark, Preston Smith's been non-existent, and on Sunday he got fewer snaps than Lucas Van Ness, who's been really bad this year, and Inigbari. And that tells you something. Like, if Preston ain't playing more than those guys, then something's going on there.
He was the second highest graded player in that game, but 21 snaps. So I mean, that's
and he didn't have very many pass rushing snaps too, which is surprising. So
right,
if he's not getting those snaps, then the coaches are seeing something too. They need those guys to start producing.
Well, and I've been watching, and I was talking to my dad. Shout out, Dad. He's too old. He's in bed right now. There's no way he's listening to this. but we're talking about this, and he loves to go hard on the criticisms, right? Oh, this guy, he stinks. Get him out of there. He stinks. Get him out. But like with Rashawn Gary, I'm pretty defensive of that one. Like my thing about Rashawn Gary is we've seen him play as good as anybody in the league, as a pass rusher, and you cannot question the guy's effort. The guy's he's just always going. Like he's a workout warrior. So that's when I look to like, all right, I'm looking at the coaches now. And so I think really what's happening is the coaches are trying to figure out how to use guys in the best way. And, I don't know what they're trying to teach these guys as far as what they have to read, what their responsibilities are. Can you go upfield in this situation or can you not? A lot of times you got to stay home and maintain that discipline. And that can be tough because it can be tempting to want to go upfield. So there's a range of things that could be going on. And we learned that when, Devondre Campbell started talking about some of the things in the Joe Barry system that were just not obvious to the average, football watcher, or even some expert football watchers probably weren't picking up on those things because it's hard to know exactly what a guy's responsibilities are when, the play takes off. So most of the time, only those guys know that. So we got to leave room for that because we've seen these guys play well. I mean, every last one of them. We're not even just talking about one guy. It's Rashawn Gary. It's Preston Smith. It's Kenny Clark. It's really the whole D line. Colby Wooden. All these guys have done very well at some point, like to a point where you're like, wow, that guy's good, and I'll leave Quay out of this because Quay hasn't really played well. He's been okay kind of the whole time. He's starting to fit into AJ Hawk territory for me a little bit. But these other guys have played really well at different points in their careers, and you just sort of expect that. And I'm even willing to give LVN the benefit of the doubt because his peers are struggling too. So it's like, we're critical of him. He's not playing well. It's like, yeah, but he's not an exception right now. So what's going on the D line is my question. What kind of coaching is going on down there? What are they being asked to do? What are they being, kind of restricted from doing, if anything? But one thing is Gary's definitely starting to pick it up. He's gotten more pressures lately. He's got more sacks lately. So we are not a full season into the system. And in some ways, Hafley is probably still working on how his system best defends against certain offensive looks that he may not have worked against before, especially with a guy like Ben Johnson. But so there's all these things we got to leave room for. And we can't have this like doom and gloom. These guys stink. Let's start over kind of mentality. Because it's like, hang on a second. We've seen that they don't. So let's just wait. Let's just see what's going on. Let them cook, right? Like we've been watching all the other guys cook. Let's let them cook, And overall, what Hafley's done with the defense, I think we've got to be okay. Just sit back and be like, hey, you just held arguably the best offense in the league to 17 points. If that involves your defensive line being kind of disappointing in the pass rush department, okay, I'll take it. You still held them to 17 points. That's pretty damn good. So we have to sort of see what we're willing to take and give up. And, if you went out and you just got your butt whooped to the tune of like 35 points that you gave up on defense, that's a totally different story. And again, I forgot Jordan Love gave the pick 6. So 7 of those points, the defense is not involved in at all. So we really do. I get 17 points that they'd held them to very reasonable yardage. By all standards, as far as the outcomes go, the defense is playing well as a whole. And we have to be able to just take that for what it is and not be too picky and looking for perfection in these things. And that's where I would say, maybe there is a way where it's like, hey, this is working. Let's not mess this up. But as soon as this doesn't work, option B is to start firing pass rush, and maybe we get that at some point because what they're doing right now with the pass defense and the DBs and everybody, it's working. Like, we got all these criticisms for the linebackers, and we're not sure about this guy and that. The cornerbacks, like, who's going? It's funny how we can go through and have all these problems. Like, the defensive line is disappointing, the pass rush is disappointing, the run defense is disappointing, the corners are disappointing, the linebackers are disappointing. Yet somehow we just held one of the best offenses in the league to 17 points. That's like, well, I mean, there's got to be room for somebody to have played well besides just Xavier McKinney. So that's where I just say, like, let's pump the brakes, Packers fans. The sky's not falling. Just because things don't seem to be perfect doesn't mean they're not working. So that's where we got to be, and they're all super young, with the exception of Preston Smith. He is who he is. We can't really expect that guy to become a different player. The rest of these guys, even Rashawn Gary, still a young dude. Still plenty of room for growth in all of them. That's my stance on it.
Yeah, and I get it. Like, we can criticize, and I've seen it all over Twitter since the game yesterday, and we're talking about all the issues on defense, and this thing and that thing needs to be better. This player needs to be better, but they still held them to 17 points. They're an improved defense over what they were under Joe Barry. They've had some really good moments this year and some nice games. Like, you can see that they're better. They're better coached. They're better schemed. They make better adjustments for sure. But there's still, like, all this room for improvement too. So it's, kind of like, do you want to look at, linebackers, they need to do this at linebacker, the cornerbacks other than Jair need to step it up. The pass rush is at best inconsistent or not, and they still have way too leaky of a run defense. Like, all those things are true, but they got a pretty decent defense as far as what we've seen from them in the recent past. Yes, it can get better, and they need it to get better, but it's much better than where we were a year ago at this time, or really at any point during Joe Barry's 3 years as defensive coordinator. So look on the positive side. It's made significant strides, and it's got to get better. But they have some guys who are underperforming, who have done it in the past, who need to step it up. And if they do step it up and they do play up to their capabilities and what we've seen from them, it's going to make a huge difference, and the defense can take another leap.
Yeah, this team has very high potential, and I know everybody's sick of hearing about the potential, but the point is it's got to come together. But also look at where you're at. You can't be disappointed because you haven't reached your full potential when where you're at's not bad. You're on your way there, and we've got legendary Hall of Fame receiver Chris Carter in the comments with us. Just kidding, Chris C. I'm just throwing that in there. I don't know what Chris's last name is, but he's saying we were 3-6 this time last year. I think that's really the best way to put it, man. It's 6-3 right now. That is big time improvement. You can't say the defense isn't improved. It absolutely is. It's massively improved. We're all just sitting here giddy about all these turnovers we're getting. We got Xavier McKinney's the best safety in the league with all the interceptions he's getting. So absolutely got to leave room for that perspective. The sky is not falling. So if you came here in hopes to hear us panic about the sky falling, we are not going to do that. And that's just all there is to it. There's just too much to be excited about, too much to be looking forward to. Yeah, there's certainly possibility for disappointment, possibility for these guys to continue to make mistakes. But I just think what you've seen so far is growth. So I don't know why you would expect to not see more growth. So that's what I'm looking forward to. Hopefully they get a lot of work in over the bye. But, I'm not going to steal Aaron Rodgers' old term, but, something along the lines of relax, right? Like, chill out, guys. I'm not going to spell out chill out, but chill out. Everybody just chill out. We gotta enjoy this. We got to enjoy these Packer victories. There's 6 of them already, and 2.5 of them the starting quarterback is not responsible for. That's a big deal. That's a real big deal.
That's showing they can overcome adversity and win when they're not at full strength. And we said it at the time. That's a good sign for what this team can build into and what they can be. So
there's not a lot of teams like that around the league right now. Even coming into the season, the Dolphins probably looked really intimidating, and their quarterback goes down for a few games. Who knows if he's even still the same dude? Poor guy is just out there running around with potatoes for brains. But, they're not very good right now.
No, they couldn't. They could barely score a touchdown without to it.
Yeah.
And there's good teams that if they lost their starting quarterback for 2.5 games, they would really struggle. The Packers won those two, and they won the 3 games where Jordan Love went down. So look at that. That's the bright side of it. That's the adversity that they've played through and that they've overcome to win games. It shows the potential of what they can build into. So long way to go. It's 9 games. It's halfway through the season, but there's, it's a long. We see what they can be, both good and bad. It's just a matter of which way they're going to go the rest of the way. But there's still a lot of football to be played, and coming out of this bye, they got Bears, Niners, Dolphins, and then the rematch with the Lions. Not that that's going to be easy, but those are all winnable games going into Detroit. And then we'll see what happens against the Lions in the rematch.
Yeah, I think they're all winnable games. I think it's a decent stretch of challenge and kind of an opportunity for sharpening a little bit. But yeah, a lot, that rematch with the Lions is a big date there. And if you can take that, then that's a great sign for the rest of the way.
Yeah, let's not get ahead of it. And the Bears are first up. But my point is just like, it's 6-3 isn't bad, and they can very easily go on a run again this year and be in a really good spot going into the playoffs.
No doubt. And well put here by, I think it's Nostalgic with an X. Oh, I see the Nas TXLJ. I see you with the Texas in there. Maybe. Why do people think every regular season game has to be almost perfect, or every regular season has to be almost perfect to be able to win a Super Bowl? You just got to get in the playoffs. I mean, how do we have amnesia about last season? That's basically what the story was. I mean, they traded away Rasul Douglas because they thought the season was over. Gutekunst damn near said that. That's pretty much what he said.
What about? And then, I'm sorry, not to cut you off. What about 2010? They were 10-6. Not a great regular season, but they got in. They got hot. They had to win their last 2 regular season games just to make the playoffs that season.
Yep.
And then they went to the Super Bowl. It wasn't a great regular season. So right. Yeah, you're right. You don't have to have a perfect regular season, but your team has to build and get better, and you want to be playing your best football in December and into January in playoff time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so there's no reason they can't be doing that. There's no reason they can't be playing their best football ahead of them right now. And the regular season, again, my point would be kind of about the Lions. Like, if you're playing perfect in the regular season, you almost have to be a little bit worried about that. You almost have to be a little bit worried that, you're going to decline at the wrong time. So, from where the Packers are at, I think they've got everything still in front of them. And they're, all the panic needs to just go away, but it won't, because that's, Packers fans are good at being entitled and panic at the wrong time, but that's fine. Then our good point here, agrees with Tim on the cornerbacks, and why not get one with 2 weeks to get them ready? Preston, no loss at this point, could see a move. I definitely could see a move. I don't know if that involves Preston or not. I don't know if it's for a corner or not. One move, and it seems like this team is in fire sale mode, that could be interesting is Chase Young. He's having kind of a disappointing NFL career, and the co-defensive coordinator, his best season at Ohio State was none other than Jeff Hafley. So if there's anybody that might be able to resurrect Chase Young's best football, it could be Jeff Hafley. There's no reason to doubt that. So that could be an interesting move that might be relatively low cost for them because the Saints are in fire sale mode. I think Lattimore is one that's also being shopped. Is that correct?
Yeah. He's got a big contract, but if, they got him this year, I think it might be something where they could just cut him at the end of the year and get out of those last couple of years, or rework it, or whatever it may be. He's also had some injury issues, so I think he's still playing, or he might be out right now. I can't remember. But yeah, Lattimore would be a really nice pickup. Chase Young was traded last year at the trade deadline to the Niners. He didn't really make a big impact with the 49ers, but yeah, Jadeveon Clowney with the Panthers. He's been rumored that he might go. There's nobody out there that I'm really like, man, that's, at least among the guys that have been rumored. There could be other players that get traded that, we don't see coming, but there's nobody out there where I'm like, go get this guy. You know, like there's some guys like if they got Chase Young or Clowney or I'd be like, okay, that's a good move. You
I
know,
would find it very interesting if they did, for
it
sure.
helps, right? Like Lattimore would potentially, if he comes in and he's healthy,
Yeah.
he's a difference maker. Him and Jair is a huge upgrade.
Yeah.
I don't know if he really gets moved, but we'll see. You know, yeah, I would be fine if they added a cornerback or a pass rusher. I would be shocked if they make a move to bring somebody in, but I think those are the two positions. And then you bring up Preston Smith, or in the comments was Preston. It's been weird. There's been a few rumors out there that teams are calling about him, and at first I'm like, "What? That makes no sense for the Packers to trade him." And it kind of doesn't because they're a contending team. I think it would hurt in the locker room, but then when
I do too.
You look at on the field, I don't think he's done a whole lot this year. I think he's got a couple sacks, but they were in the Tennessee game. He's been pretty quiet, and when it was maybe it meant nothing, maybe it was just a rotation or the way the game played out, but against the Lions, for him to get fewer snaps, to just play 21 snaps, get fewer snaps to Van Ness and Enigbare, that was kind of telling. And there were some, Mosby, Aaron Mosby even got, I think he only got like a handful of snaps, but a couple of them were pass rushing downs. And he's out there.
He put Sewell on his butt.
Sewell tripped over a lineman too.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah, he tripped over.
Man.
So it was, but he got a couple pass rushing snaps. And if he's out there in pass rushing snaps and Preston's not, I don't know. That tells me something. I don't know what, but it's maybe the coaches are seeing poor play from Preston, or just, he's just not getting it done. I don't know. But it wouldn't surprise me if they moved on from him. I mean, if they were in the spot they were in last year, it would make a lot of sense. But being a 6-3 team, I think you got to worry about how that would go over in the locker room. So that's
and I don't think you need to risk that at 6-3.
Right. Like if you moved him, but you were bringing in like Clowney or Young, then you could say, okay, that would make some sense. But that's the holdup, is that you're 6-3, you're going to move him. That's not a good sign for the guys in the room. But as far as on the field play goes, it would make sense to me because he's been pretty invisible for the most part. So.
Yeah, and that's where I look at the rest of it. It's like a lot of these guys have, we're talking about, we're disappointed by Gary and really the rest of the pass rushers in the D line. I'm just interested in seeing how that continues to develop. And that's why, I just kind of wonder what's going on beneath the surface of that. And I think we'll find out. And I really would not be surprised if the second half of the season includes more pass rush from these guys and more success from the pass rush. So, but hey, we get a bye week, so we're undefeated this week. Ain't no losing. That's for sure. That can't happen. And then we get the Bears. So I am really looking forward to a little trash talk about the Bears. Maybe we can convince a Bears fan to come on and do a little behind the enemy lines with us. I know a few of you out there. You see if you're brave enough to join, but we'll also probably do an episode of the OG Rivals podcast where I'll hop in with a Bears fan and we'll chop it up for about an hour or so about who's better. And obviously we know who wins that argument. So spoiler alert, but it's always fun to talk a little trash with those guys. But yeah, so it should be fun. We'll tune in next Monday for sure. We'll have a lot of fun Bears talk next Monday. Looking ahead to that one, I am very, very excited to see how this Packers defense does against the generational talent that is Caleb Williams. Very, very excited. But yeah, so let's talk about it next week. We're out of time this week. So I thank y'all for hanging out with us. Thank you for tuning in this late Monday evening on the Packers Weekly Podcast, part of PackersTalk.com network. If y'all would, check us out on YouTube. It's the Packers Talk YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button for us on there. It's real quick. You just do it right now, and it would make a big difference for us. And while you're at it, spike that like button on this episode if you enjoyed it. And of course, we will see y'all next week, Packers fans. Go.